So my name's Nat, and I'm going to be your host today, and I'm with an organization called Exceptional Individuals. We deliver these webinars every single Thursday on a whole wide range of subjects. We've done them dyslexia in the workplace, the science of autism, history of ADHD, everything really. So if you enjoy today, hopefully you can come back and see future ones and also catch up on ones you may have missed. But today we are going to take a deep dive into what ADHD looks like in the workplace. You know, how is it for the individual? What works, what doesn't work, what managers should know, what managers don't know. And hopefully some of you can get some top tips out of it and probably take away a few things too. So yeah, we specialize in all of the neurodivergences, though today we're going to be focusing on ADHD. But as some of you have rightly said, it's very, very common to have multiple things going on under the hood. So a lot of these things are going to overlap, but we'll try and stay focused. But as someone who is neurodivergent myself, as a lot of you will probably be aware, staying focused may not be the strong point, but also that's part of the charm. So we're going to go on a bit of a divergent tangent today. So this is our lovely team, and we are 80% neurodiverse. There's about 20 of us in the team now, and I wouldn't go as far to say experts, that's probably a bit big-headed, but specialists in everything resulting in recruitment, consultancy, employment, all those great things. And we're hopefully a company that does good in the world, so we're a social enterprise because we offer a lot of our services for free. So for any of you today who were kind enough to support this session financially, thank you a lot because it means other people are able to attend for free. So really appreciate that. The most recent one we have is Autism Discrimination. So Autism Discrimination, this was a really interesting one where we looked at real case tribunals of what happens when it all goes wrong and how does it turn out. Really interesting, and hopefully we'll have one on ADHD in the future. I've applied to be a mentee. How long do I have to wait to be contacted back? Good question. It depends on which cohort is kind of going through at the moment. Not the best person to ask, but if you email us, we'll be able to let you know. Great. Okay, ADHD in the office. Now, I know this session is called In the Workplace today. However, I have absolutely been binging The Office. I love the show. Watched the British one, thought the American one could be nearly as good. Actually, it's just as good, if not better. So apologies / not apologies for the amount of gifts that I'm going to be putting in your faces today. Is it the most ADHD friendly? Arguably not, but I also think it does make it a bit more fun. Nice, we've got Lily loves a GIF. That's what I like to hear. And I can see we've got some questions coming in here, which is great. Oh, I'd be interested to know what successful support in the workplace looks like. I'm currently in conversations with the DWP about getting a PA and not sure how to ask for it. What can I ask for? Very good. Hopefully we will be tackling that as we go on. So that is good. Nice. Christy needs some gifts today. Well, you've come to the right place. So before we get started, what is ADHD? ADHD is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And that is the general label. Now, it used to have other names, sometimes it was ADHD, other times it was ADD, and that was because not everyone shows the same characteristics. But people were kind of getting missed then, it was getting complicated, so they rejoined it together, and now we have ADHD. But there's 3 kind of core symptoms of ADHD. Now, interestingly, you do not need to have all of them in order to get a diagnosis. So some people will say, well, you're not very hyperactive, you can still have ADHD. And typically, women are less likely to show the hyperactive side. And as a result, unfortunately, gets missed. And a lot of people in the office, we're not expecting anyone to be a genius in the subject, but to have a basic knowledge would be really helpful. Unfortunately, that basic knowledge is quite an outdated set of knowledge. And that's why people don't really kind of almost accept those who have ADHD without the classic hyperactive tendencies. So we've got inattention. This is when you could lose focus, find it hard to concentrate, seeing tasks through to the end. We've got impulsivity. So when you just kind of don't overthink about things, you just do it, very spontaneous. And also hyperactivity, where you have a lot of energy And again, you can either have all of these, one of these, two of them, it can be mixed about. A lot of people have all of them, but some might not. So it's kind of interesting to see how it affects people a little bit different. But I am going to assume most of you have an idea of what ADHD is today, but we are going to be talking about real examples. On this slide, a bit of true and false. I just want to find out where your knowledge is. So on here, you either say if it's true or if it's false. So the first one, ADHD is covered under the Equality Act 2010. And I appreciate this is more UK focused on that question, but I promise you it's not going to be that focused on the UK overall. Then we got people with ADHD need extra support. ADHD is a neurological difference. ADHD cannot co-occur with other learning differences. ADHD can affect attention and concentration only. Ooh, we've got some mixed answers at the moment going around. I'm curious. Let's find out the answer. I'm not that curious because I made it, but still interesting to see what you all put. False, false, true, false, false. So ADHD is covered under the Equality Act. It is true. ADHD is covered under the Equality Act, but it's not explicitly mentioned. However, there are multiple tribunals which have used ADHD as the subject, which have been covered. So yeah, in other countries, it varies, but typically it is also. Then we got people with ADHD need extra support. Now, I put this one as false, and let me tell you why. Because some people with ADHD need extra support, but there's many, 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 many people with ADHD who are completely fine how they are. And that's important to know because say if you're a manager, you might think, oh, someone has ADHD, I have to do something for them. No, it's about having that dialogue. So some of these are going to be a little bit debatable, but feel free to hold me to account if you disagree. ADHD is a neurological difference. Absolutely, that is true. It is not a mental health difficulty or illness. Do they go together? Yeah, they do hang out a lot, but they're not part of the same thing. ADHD cannot co-occur with other neurological differences. No, it's very, very common. Most people with ADHD will have either autism, they might have OCD, they might have anxiety, they could have addictive tendencies. All these things really do go together. Omar says, I'd reword that to people with ADHD should be offered extra support. Yes, I think that's a good one. They should be, but it doesn't mean they have to or need it. I think, it's more of a trick languagey question. And we've got ADHD can affect attention and concentration only. False. ADHD, though, as we learned previously, it does affect those things, or it can affect those things, but it can also affect other areas such as sleep, word processing. It kind of one of those things that on its own might not be inherently that bad, but when you kind of apply to other life circumstances, it can make everything else a hell of a lot more difficult and more challenging. So I kind of see it like an additional thing which can make life easier or difficult depending on the circumstances. But yeah, great stuff, everyone. All right, next one of the bunch. And you'll notice I am getting crazy with the gifts already. We have only just begun. ADHD. Do people with ADHD prefer structured work days? Yes or no? Do people with ADHD prefer long periods or working in isolation? Opportunities for movement, repetitive tasks without variation, and lastly, regular and fairly immediate feedback. Yeah, so many trick questions. I'm really sorry. I just like to keep you on your feet today. So what are the answers to these? And as always, a lot of these can be debated, but hopefully I'll explain why I picked these answers. So correct, not correct, correct, not correct, correct. So a structured work day. Yes, most people with ADHD do benefit from having a structured work day. Asterisks. That doesn't mean every single thing planned to a T, but having some sort of structure. So I don't care how you do this job, but this is the priority. Obviously, we're making a couple of assumptions here today, but we're going with a lot of the average. But do remember, there really isn't no such thing as average. Then we got long periods working in isolation. Some people do like working in isolation, but a lot of people with ADHD can find that just as distracting. We always think, okay, they get distracted by a lot of people. Let's put them in a room on their own. No, sometimes silence can be the most distracting thing. For me, I can't possibly concentrate without music in the background. I've tried and it drives me insane. I'd love to know any of your thoughts. We've got opportunity for movements. Yes. Do not say you're stuck in that chair. Get up, move around every hour, get up for a 5-minute walk at least. It's really, really important. And even more so now, a lot of us work at home. Movement is still important. Then we've got repetitive tasks without variation. Yeah, not true. Most people with ADHD like having that diversity, like having that freedom of choice. Otherwise, their brain kind of gets bored. It needs to continuously be stimulated. And then we've got regular and fairly immediate feedback. People with ADHD can typically overthink things. Their brain can kind of get stuck in a rut. It overlaps with OCD quite heavily. And that can be a pain, because then if someone says, I want to see you later, they probably just mean I'm a bit busy now, but we'll have a chat soon. But with someone with ADHD, they can overthink it and they could essentially have a meltdown. You know, we've all been that thing where someone says, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And then you're like, what about what? Are you happy with me? Are you angry with me? It can go in all sorts of directions. Yasmin says, I have auditory processing disorder and Irene, and they're definitely co-occurring. Absolutely. We've got opportunities for movement. Thank you for putting it into words. Nice. Love music. Who doesn't? I've been a big man of, okay, now we've got some music. I second the light background music. Oh, nice. Lily has 5 to 15-minute dance breaks. I definitely have about 5-minute dance breaks, but I don't know if I could dance for 15 minutes, but good on you. Nice. Ross says can't do anything in silence. Brilliant. So a lot of you are resonating, and feedback is life. It's so important, honestly. Just continuous feedback, but obviously constructive, makes a big difference. So thank you everyone for chipping in there. Okay, now we're on to ADHD support. What support is out there? Do we need support? If we did, how does support look like? And how do we kind of get that support? Do we have to ask? Is it the manager's responsibility? Many, many things. How do you manage challenges in the workplace? So this is a question to all of you. When you kind of run up problems with ADHD, has there been things that have worked for you in the past? If you do not have ADHD, how have you supported someone with ADHD? And if you believe you have ADHD, do you have certain coping strategies, mechanisms, systems in place, things that have worked time and time again? Oh, we've got, I think it depends on what stage I'm in. Sometimes it's easier to get onto a hyperfocus. Yeah, we often talk about the advantage of hyperfocus, but it doesn't mean we can always kind of click it on. Okay, I run off my ... Having a mentor is great. Yes, a mentor, a buddy, a life coach can be really useful. I'm a big fan of just, you know, people who take therapy, not because they are in a place where they need it, but just as a standard practice of good mental well-being. Oh, Ashley says loop bands for meetings takes the pressure off. Oh, hibernate. I'm not good way, but I hibernate. I do a lot of hibernating. I turn off my neurodivergence and go into work mode. Honestly, tell me how you do that. I'd love to know. Deal with them ASAP so they don't magnify. Yes, that kind of backs them with the regular feedback. Regular catch-ups, brown noise. Isn't it called white noise? I thought brown noise is a sound that makes you, you know. But either way, background noise is really helpful. I just make sure I'm honest with my colleagues and managers if they know where I am and what I'm up to. It's much easier to get on with. I let my classmates and teachers know that I have zero self-control and will continue to speak until I put noise-cancelling headphones on. I think that's on honesty, best policy. I actually have no idea. No. Hourly beeps to remind me about timings. Yes, I'm a big fan of that. I've got one of these blocks where you can see like the blue. So it's a very visual way of kind of keeping track of time. We've got daily meditation. I hibernate and don't answer the phone. Yes, a lot of people do that where they'll just kind of say no emails for an hour and get on with things. I make to-do lists. We're going to be talking about to-do lists in a bit. I put everything in one place as much as possible, Google Calendar. I also prefer to do exactly what I need at the time. I'm the same, but I wonder if any of you have any answers to this. I love technology. I use it a lot, but I have so much of it, it's actually become its own distraction. I put myself on busy in the calendar, having deadlines. I use lots of apps and tools. Honestly, all of these are really great. Being my own boss, self-employed, so I create and adjust my work environment. Nice, I like that good variation. So the question is we know lots of ways that as individuals we deal or kind of support our ADHD, but why should employers bother with us? Why should they even care? It seems like a lot of work if what are you getting in return? Well, these are just some of the top things which I've witnessed as working with someone with ADHD every single day. The ability to hyper-focus on things they're interested in. And I added that bit at the end, things they are interested in, because the hyper-focus isn't like a superpower you can just click on. You have to be really engaged. But if you find something you are engaged in, oh my God, you're going to put in 110%. Be careful of burnout though, but there is a lot of great skills with that. The willingness to take risks. For some reason, the society is scared of risk taking. Because people with ADHD have that kind of less of a filter, they're more likely to jump straight into something. Yes, that can have downsides, but it also can result in innovation and out-of-the-box thinking. That spontaneity, that flexibility, that kind of good in a crisis mode, very good at creative ideas. Now, some of you might say, this doesn't sound like me at all, and that's fine. But these are some of the things that crop up quite often with a lot of people. Nice, I'm currently doing minimalism to make my visual space more focused and less cluttered. I agree. So now we're going to navigate the workplace. How can we make it as nice as a place as we possibly can when our brains are telling us to do everything but focused and pay attention? So here are some of the positives of ADHD. Now, I want us to you tell me which ones you resonate most with. Why? Because we are told continuously how bad our brains are. Maybe it's even ourselves telling us how bad it is. It is also good to acknowledge the strengths that come with it. It can make it a lot easier to deal with it on a day-to-day. So let's say you often have an eye for detail. You might rate that as number 1, or let's say you never have relentless energy. You might put that as a 4. Okay, all nice. Being motivated by short-term deadlines. Nice, that's the one that's gotten the most so far. I do find lots of little deadlines are a lot more easy to focus and say, when you do your New Year's resolutions, they're never going to work. That's a whole year. We've got being motivated. Oh, being optimistic. Nice, mind over matter. I do think, though you can't rely completely on that, it does go a massive way. An eye for detail, relentless energy. And I kind of like that this was put at the end, because this kind of idea that people with ADHD have like this unlimited supply of like energy just isn't true. Maybe some, but not most. I need to separate big projects into small tasks in order to even to start them. Yeah, the struggle is real, my friend. So the thing to remember about ADHD, and this is particularly talking to managers, is that ADHD is different for everyone. If, say, you've got a kid with ADHD, you've got a nephew, you've known someone in the past, yes, use that as a case of inspiration, but please don't rely on that experience because it really is unique for everyone. People with ADHD have a really broad range of skills, interests, and intelligence, just like the rest of society. This might seem obvious, but often people think we are have a learning condition where we're like less intelligent, we're kind of so disabled that would be a real hindrance on the organization. No, our intelligence, interests, and skills are at the same level as anyone else. It's just the way we process them, which tends to be different. Communicate openly with your employees and ask them questions you may have. Why do I ask this? Kind of goes back to the point I just said. A lot of people's understanding of ADHD is either not there, false, out of date, or based on 1 or 2 case studies. It really does need to be talked on a one-to-one. Most of us, I think, would be completely happy if someone took an interest in our life and wanted to understand it more. But a lot of managers might either just be a bit wary or scared to put their foot in it. If you maybe approach them and say, I'm okay if you want to ask me questions, maybe that could open it up a little bit. We are all individuals. Now for the history of workplace ADHD. We know working in the world of work as someone with ADHD can be a right pain. but it's also kind of interesting to know why we got here. Is it because the condition itself makes work near impossible, or is it because the way that society has developed, which makes it the most challenging? Mostly the second one, but let's see how we get on. So question to all of you, how has ADHD traditionally been seen in the workplace? If we're talking from like a historical context, either at a few like 10 years ago, 20 or now, if someone was to say, oh, I have ADHD, either in an interview stage or in the office, what would be like the first thoughts that come to people's mind? Nice. Omar says, I think that I'm able to be really honest with myself because of what I call the ADHD seesaw. For every perceived deficit, I see an advantage somewhere else, and that it's just deficit management. Oh, that's a really nice way of looking at it. Aziz says, I struggle a lot with my impulsivity due to my ADHD and society anxiety due to my autism, especially makes it difficult with keeping a job. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And that is really common, that people who have co-occurring conditions, together, they can almost create the perfect storm sometimes. So we've got lazy and over-emotional, job hopper, hyperactivity, disorganized, chaotic, disruptive, hyper, fictional, negative, talkative, not known. Oh, it's not even known in Lithuania. Unorganized, disorganized, invisible, too energetic, rude. Wow. And do you know what? Bossy, these things, scatty, yeah, these things are in people's minds. I used to be known as Scatty Natty because I was all over the place. And even if these things aren't true, these are the words that are in the back of people's heads. And these are some of the challenges that we need to overcome. But when I say we, I don't mean us as people with ADHD. I mean society, because it takes approaches from everyone in order to change these negative stereotypes. Fictional. Oh, you don't have ADHD, you just need to pay attention. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, God. People used to think ADHD was like a pandemic, kind of a fake disorder. It is not. It is very, very real. There is scientific evidence. There are brain scans. There is a lot of evidence to back it up. It's a real thing. And it doesn't just affect kids, and it doesn't just affect boys. So some of the ways that companies have often misinterpreted ADHD are as followed. So these are like common misconceptions and hopefully ways to correct them. So many people with ADHD have problems with sleep. People always think it's about being like really buzzing. It's about when you're awake, when you're conscious, but ADHD can also affect people in their downtime because the brain isn't able to shut off. This is why sometimes people with ADHD can struggle to turn up to work on time. They might struggle with getting to places because they're so sleep deprived. It's not a made up excuse that, oh, I missed my alarm. It genuinely is a real thing. Oh, we've also got an interesting comment that says, can be intersectional with racism. I called the Mad Irish one by a colleague in the UK. Yeah, people do like to clump them together with other conditions. Not cool. We've also got fewer than 1 in 1,000 adults with ADHD take medication. There's this thing that all people with ADHD are on medication that kind of like suppresses them. Not at all. Medication can be a really useful tool in order to support you manage some of the perceived negatives, or just help you kind of get by the day. But honestly, it's not for everyone. And most people do not take the medication, mainly because they don't even know they have ADHD. But even those that do might choose it's not the best thing for them. It truly is a personal choice. ADHD often comes with associate conditions. We've already mentioned this. People often think you're ADHD, you can't have everything. Yes, we can. It is a spectrum. So saying ADHD might be your primary diagnosis, but you might also have, say, mild characteristics of autism, possibly not enough to get diagnosed with it, but enough that it affects you and it makes your ADHD appear different to other people with ADHD. Well, Ashley said, meds are awesome for me. It helps me with uni to focus on assignments. Brilliant. Honestly, great for you. I'm not here to advocate nor not advocate. It really is a personal choice. So how can adults with ADHD skill up? We know there's challenges. We're not trying to beat around the bush, but are there things that can make it a bit easier? We mentioned a few things already, but there are some really easy solutions that can possibly help. Now, assistive technology. Have any of you ever used any? Probably so. Maybe it was really good, maybe it wasn't. So what assistive technology have you used before? Now, I put white noise apps, but I know some of you mentioned brown noise apps. I mean, we'll just say color noise apps. Now, obviously, there are others. Now, a lot of people think that those with ADHD wouldn't benefit from things that support those with dyslexia, such as text-to-speech and speech-to-text. But actually, it can really help you get your ideas out fluidly. You can speak faster than you can write, so speech-to-text could be really useful. If you struggle with comprehension and kind of keeping your mind fixed, text-to-speech can be useful. I always use text-to-speech on everything I write, which means the computer reads it back to me. Not because I cannot read, but because it helps me retain the information better. It helps my brain stays focused. That's also how I read books. So on here, we've got a lot of you use to-do lists. Then a lot of you use note-taking apps. A few of you use white noise, and only a few of you use website blockers. Website blockers are things that, let's say you're always going on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. You can get these apps which block those sites for like X amount of hours. Can you get around them? Yes. I used to download them and I would always find a way of disabling them, even the ones that are meant to like be really difficult. But if you have a little bit more self-control, maybe they could be a good starting point. Oh, nice. We got Lily uses Otter AI. We've also got Katana. Nice. So just a few that I've used, which don't get mentioned nearly as enough, are these. So for to-do lists, I use Todoist. I think Todoist is great. It's really simple. It's not over the top. There's no bells and whistles. Here's an example of what it looks like on the side. And what I like about it, you can use it on your like little watch thing. You can use it on your phone, on your computer. You can use it as a plug-in to Google. There's also Wunderlist, which I haven't used as much, but I hear good things about it. Then you got speech to text. Dragon is the one which is the most popular, but also super expensive. So you can also use things like Google Docs voice typing, Apple Dictation. Those are both free. Site blockers. I've used one called Cold Turkey, which will then stop me from going on like YouTube when I'm meant to be having a real hard focus hour. There's also other sites which force you to take breaks, where it will literally say every, say, hour, it will block my screen or like lock it. So I have to go off, have a jog, come back, which can be really useful. Ambient noise apps. I mean, some of you already mentioned it, but Focus at Will, that one's quite good, where you can just kind of play bird sounds. I listen to rain sounds quite often, just things that have like a continuous repetitive kind of in the background, not too much variation. And lastly, note taking. Oh, nice. Okay. Insight timer, great ambient noise too. Thanks for that. Noise cancelling headphones, absolutely. Emma uses monday.com. We also use that at Exceptional Individuals. Microsoft Office has a built-in assistive function in Word. Nice. Forest as an app, website blocker helps a lot. Okay, brilliant. Thank you all for these suggestions. They are really, really great. ASMR is the best. Nice. There was one centre in Lithuania doing brain scans for diagnosing ADHD, but it closed during quarantine. I'm hesitant to get a diagnosis without the scan, as I don't think it's BS-proof. Suggestions. That is tough, particularly in a country which doesn't have as much awareness and understanding. What I would do is, we've got like on our website, we've got characteristic quizzes. Are they 100%? Of course not, but they're a good conversation starter. So kind of go to them with basically your outline. You do the research. As someone who comes from a country who does recognize it, I might not be the best person to give advice, but even in the country in the UK where there is awareness, it's still incredibly difficult to get a diagnosis. I would probably suggest going private if you're able to afford it. That's on a little bit of a side note. Now, let's move on to the next section, and you're all doing great for time. How employers can help. We work with a lot of employers up and down the country and even internationally, and a lot of them genuinely want to help, but they don't always have the correct information to do so. How can employers help? Question to all of you again. If there was something which would make the world of a difference, rather it's a big thing or a small thing, what could they do? Like, say you're actually talking to all the employers in the world right now. What makes the biggest difference? Oh, Asa says, can we keep the slides in the recording? Yes, you can. So this is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube. Yes, as Yasmin said, thanks. Oh, nice. Yasmin says, I found that doing these quizzes and research really helped me get tips and tricks. I think that's really useful. Never assume that the GP is an expert in ADHD. They know about it, but that doesn't mean they know enough about it. So you always have to do the extra effort. Nice. Okay. Lily says, I use reminders on my phone, post-it notes, index cards. Usually other people notice them and remind me. That's a good way as well. So how can employers help? Listen. That is a really good one. Do not act without listening to the people you aim to support. Assessments of individual presentation, awareness and understanding. Make all of the organizations attend training for awareness. Yes, a big fan of that. Don't just make a couple of people train, make everyone train. Offer greater supervision, but not micromanagement. That's a really good one. That's a fine line between how can I support them without over-supporting them. Be less judgmental, take part in training, make themselves aware of ADHD and other types of neurodiversity. Trust my process. I like that one a lot. You've lived your entire life with ADHD. You might not know it inside and out, but you're still the world expert in it. Support with reasonable adjustments, offer extra support and listen to specific support you need. Use daily overview channels in Slack where we all write our daily tasks. The company I work for has been fantastic with this kind of thing. We are both still learning what works. I've only had the awareness of my ADHD since Jan 22. I like that. That's a really good way to notice. You are all both still learning. Do not expect anyone to ever be the expert, but if you've got a manager that really genuinely cares, it's going to make the world a difference. Give proper feedback, start from ADHD accommodations, offer solutions other than to-do lists or prioritization. Yeah, though we did mention them today, they are kind of like the go-to. Sometimes the best solutions are more like bespoke, personal ones. Trust my process is brilliant, couldn't agree more. Train employees to be more aware of how people can think differently and how they can best support their colleagues who have neurodiversity. And we've got no daily orders and plans. Be aware that the majority of neurodiverse people are not aware nor formally diagnosed. Laura, really great comment there. We are talking a lot about people who know they have ADHD, who are looking for support, but there's many, many people who do not know, but would still benefit from support. So I'd probably say, let's not limit this just to ADHD. Ideally, these things should be open to everyone and be in place and be policy. But we'll see how we go. But thanks everyone for these comments. Really, really useful. And we'll definitely be reverting back to them. Oh, I wonder if dyspraxia is part of ADHD or a separate condition. It's a separate condition, but it does often co-occur. Yeah, most people can have ADHD and dyspraxia, but you can also have just ADHD. You don't have to have like multiple. Okay, we're going on fast. What employers should know? These are some top tips that I wish I thought employers knew more regularly. That revealing a diagnosis takes a lot of courage. If someone has come up to you and told you they have ADHD, for them to get to that stage, that's probably been a lifelong journey. They have probably kind of like been in denial, then accepting it, then they've told people and they've kind of had these stigma attached to them. For an office to be inclusive, it takes years and years and years and years of kind of trust and building up exercises. And it only takes one thing to ruin that trust. So if someone has told you they have ADHD, please respect them, please believe them, and kind of act accordingly. Many people are afraid that if they were to disclose, they'll be seen as less capable. So are you able to offer that reassurance? People with ADHD can often feel that if they were to say, it would affect their career progression or even lead to them being unemployed or fired. You might think this is a bit excessive, but the fear is real. It has happened. So it's understandably a kind of concern. And yeah, recognize this and give reassurance. Reassurance is needed. And this kind of goes back to the feedback side. And think your employer and things that you share with your employer needs to stay confidential. You have to build this level of trust up. Trust is so, so important. Now, if there are things that your employer has to tell someone else for like a duty of care, then they should tell you beforehand that if I will have to tell someone. But the second you break that trust, doom. Oh, nice. Yasmin says, I think there's definitely need to be more awareness about how hormones affect people. Absolutely. I agree. And we're not mentioning it that much in this one, but that is true. Oh, Chris says, without a formal diagnosis, I'm worried it won't be taken seriously and it's just an excuse. Yes, in an ideal world, you shouldn't need a diagnosis. But unfortunately, in certain institutions and organizations, a diagnosis does make life a lot easier. But I would say most organizations that I've worked with, which I would consider as inclusive as can be, would accept a self-diagnosis or someone who resonates with it. Ultimately, it's about the way it manifests in you, which is important rather than a particular label. But again, I can get that it's difficult. Do assessors look for co-occurrence or just individual conditions? Really, really good question. Not all assessors are created equal. Some will only have awareness in a few. So let's say some can only diagnose dyslexia and they're not qualified to diagnose ADHD. Well, naturally, they're not going to be looking for ADHD and they'll miss it. Others will, most people will go for a diagnosis looking for a particular one, saying, okay, today we're going to have an ADHD diagnosis. Now, dyslexia might very well appear, but because everyone is so fixed on looking for a particular thing, which people have paid a lot of money for, normally there is this kind of like skew towards the one you went in for. There isn't really such a thing as an overall neurodivergent diagnosis where people can go in and they can say, oh, you got this amount. But what you'll normally get is, say, one solid thing like ADHD, and then you might get with OCD tendencies. So it will kind of be like an add-on. But a good assessor will definitely have an awareness of all of them, but it doesn't mean you'll often walk out. Normally you'll have to have a secondary diagnosis or like a follow-up appointment. Now on to the legal stuff. And this one does apply a bit more to the UK, but like I said, there are a lot of overlaps with other countries. So if you do know of any overlaps, please do say. So what is the law? Well, the law is complicated, but first of all, it is up to the person's personal choice if they want to disclose whether or not they have ADHD. They do not have to. It is a personal choice. But even if they do not disclose, they are still covered by the UK's Equality Act. Asterisk. Sometimes if you do mention you have ADHD, you are going to stand a far, far better chance of being protected later down the line. But there are instances where it was the employer should have been aware that there were challenges. But typically in the UK, at least, there's two. There's a Disability Act, which was in 1995, and the Equality Act, which amalgamated them in 2010. And though it doesn't explicitly mention ADHD, I'm pretty certain anyway, it does talk about hidden disabilities, which ADHD does fall under. And that is really important. And another way of consolidating whether or not this is classed as a disability is by looking at previous tribunals, and it definitely has been. So for all intents and purposes, ADHD is covered under the UK's Equality Act, and whether or not you see it as a disability, there's a lot of benefits in being legally recognised as a disability. Hopefully that all makes sense. My final top tips for managers is offer daily or weekly planning and progress meetings with, managers, that was worded poorly, but essentially, if you're a manager, try and have regular catch-ups. Do not try to micromanage. This isn't what it's about, but just regular check-ins. Now, this could be about planning the week ahead, or it could be looking at how you're going, Quite often, we only have these meetings when it comes to, say, the end of probation. That's way too late. We've got to have it a bit earlier. Then we've got break tasks down into clear bite-sized steps. Do not just say, all right, I need you to increase the retention of our social media followers. Say, okay, this is what I need you to do. I need you to work on, say, Twitter today or whatever. Make it really easy to tangible. Not so much that there's no flexibility, but enough where there's more focus. We've got give instructions and meetings in writing rather than verbally. Quite often people will say something verbally to someone and it will go in the ear, one out the other, or right over their head. Always good to have multiple ways of backing it up. This isn't just good for ADHD, this is good for those with autism, those with dyslexia, with all. And one thing which is often misinterpreted with ADHD is because a lot of people with ADHD can talk really fast, people assume that they can process really fast. They don't go together. You can talk fast, but still take as much time, or maybe even a little bit longer, for the information to be sucked in and retained. So by having things verbally written down, like written down as well, can make a big difference. Other things I know some of you have mentioned about a mentor is having like a buddy system. So rather than saying, okay, this is your task, go off and do it, have an accountability partner, having someone who is working with you, not kind of babysitting you, but just like a teammate, someone to collaborate with, someone with like complementary skill sets. And we also got to allow regular movements and stretching. Meetings that go on for several hours, they don't benefit anyone. Get up, shake a leg, move around, really encourage break times. I know so many people who do not take their breaks because they're so busy. Honestly, you're going to be worse off for not taking the break. Whew. All right, just looking at some of the comments now. We've got Laura says, I have ADHD reasonable adjustments that change depending on point in hormone cycle. And I have PMDD too. Oh, thanks for sharing that. Oh, nice. Okay. Lily says, I don't want my manager to break tasks down for me. I need autonomy, but I love breaking down stuff collaboratively. Great. I like that. Sometimes managers should be aware of as packaged and they can spike. Yes, ADHD can spike. Or we've got, I feel like I slack a lot of the time, but make up for it on other days when I'm able to hyper focus. I really need to try those apps to make my focus more stable throughout the week. I'm glad you mentioned that point because while most people say will work like kind of quite regular throughout the workday, those with ADHD might put all the energy into like 1 hour and be like real hyper focused, but they might lose the energy throughout the next hour or even the next day. So the kind of the fluctuation of focus does vary, but overall, it doesn't mean that you're losing out on work hours. It just means that you find other time periods that work better for you. A lot of people with ADHD might be night owls. Some might prefer to work in the mornings. And they might not always kind of fit nicely into a typical 9 to 5 work day. Oh, Laura says, I've spoken with my manager, but literally forgot what we have agreed. Writing down doesn't help as I forget notes and lists exist. Same. And that's why I think it is important to have multiple ways of documenting. So speaking verbally, writing things down, having reminders. A lot of the time, these solutions aren't going to be a one-size-fits-all. Sometimes you've got to go through a lot of them in order to find the ways that work best for you. It takes time, but you can absolutely get there. So just to finish off with, here is some of the references that we use today. You can check them out in your own leisurely time. And if any of you are currently in the workplace and do have ADHD, we mentioned about workplace adjustments, and that's one of the things that Exceptional Individuals does. We work with Access to Work, the government department, and basically you can get free support, equipment, training. All we need to do is have a job, do an assessment with us, which only takes like an hour and it's free. We apply for the grant, we get it all approved, and then we apply the training and equipment. If you're interested, drop us a message, go on our website, and we can tell you more. There's lots of organizations that do this, but we only specialize in people who are neurodiverse. So you get someone who has ADHD doing your assessment and someone with ADHD delivering the training, which is quite a unique offering. So hopefully that can be of use to some people. Now, any last questions before we wrap up today? Oh, sorry, that was a lot, guys. That was a lot of information to pack in a short amount of time. Where does the grant come from? It comes from the UK government. It's through a grant called Access to Work. Like I said, you can go directly to their website or you can go via us. The thing about going to their website is that you could get assigned by a complete randomer who doesn't really know ADHD that well. So there is benefit by going to a dedicated organization. Oh, can I talk through the grant things again? No, absolutely. We have a lot more information on our website, but essentially you can normally get around £4,500 of support if you live in the UK. Obviously, you don't get that money, but you do get things like equipment, noise cancelling headphones, different types of coaching can be really useful.
Sorry, Nat, I missed the first bit of that, what you were saying about the grant. So what can we do?
Okay. So it's called Access to Work, and you can do it directly via our website, which personally I would recommend if you have ADHD, but if it also applies to physical disabilities too.
And so what about if we haven't got a formal diagnosis? Is it still okay to...
Good question. Yes, you do not need a formal diagnosis in order to get this. You just have to have things which put you at a disadvantage, which can easily be overcome with additional support. Nice. Lily has kindly put it in the chat. So it is open to anyone who is a UK citizen, who works in the UK and has a job. If that doesn't fit your criteria, there is still support available, but that's through like other means. And I would say contact us personally for those.
And does it cost our employer anything or us anything? Or
good question. I mean, today's probably not the day to go into all the details, but if you start an organization, no, don't be sorry. If you start an organization within 6 weeks, it's completely free no matter what. If you have an organization under 50 employees, it's completely free. If none of that applies to you, the organization may have to contribute, but it's very, very highly discounted. So let's say you want some software that, I don't know, costs like $4,000, your employer might only have to pay 200, something like that. So no matter what type of organization you're in or how long you've been there, it's definitely worthwhile. Okay, just to sum up, because we can go into a lot more detail on everything before we finish for the day. We do these every single week. Next week, we're going to be looking at dyslexia in later life. How does it appear? What is it like getting a later diagnosis? How do you kind of beat the stigma? And I know a lot of you do have dyslexia as well, so do check it out. But we do have lots of different webinars and a lot of ones on ADHD as well. Here's our YouTube channel, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we do a whole wide range of ones, like the history of Hans Asperger's. We do I have anxiety disorder? Learning more about the difference between dyslexia and dysgraphia. Really do get involved. I think they're really fun. April, who is here, has edited all of them. They're great. Oh, we've got a quick question. Have you got any tips for when you have an urgent task to get done really quickly, but you just can't concentrate on focus? Yes. When you want to sleep and you can't sleep, the worst thing you can do is just stay in bed. Sometimes it's good to reset the brain. I go out, wake up, and then I try again. And if I really want to focus, I go out, I go for a jog, I change the routine, or I change location. Might not work for you, but it works for me sometimes. Hopefully that helps. And if any of you would like to stay in contact, we have our own LinkedIn community where we support people with finding jobs, tips and tricks. We might post about grants that have come up because there are always new ones coming up, different funding, things like that. Do stay in touch. And here is our contact details. So if any of you are like, I'm interested in this workplace needs assessment, or I wouldn't mind a bit of coaching or support, you can just go to our website, drop us an email, or pick up the old dog and bone. And that is where we go. Okay, brilliant. Thank you all for the lovely, lovely comments. I appreciate all of you today. It's been so great having a really interactive audience. I know I've learned loads too. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully catch you again soon.